वेरी गुड आफ्टरनून एंड वेलकम। और आज बहुत अहम दिन रहा क्योंकि फेड ने ब्याज दरों में कटौती की 50 बेसिस पॉइंट्स की। और 50 बेसिस पॉइंट्स की कटौती जो है पूरे इस कैलेंडर ईयर में हो सकती है, यानी कि बचे हुए 3 महीनों में 50 बेसिस पॉइंट और कट सकते हैं 25-25 बेसिस पॉइंट के साथ। और आने वाले साल में भी कटौती का जो ये ट्रेंड है वो बरकरार रहेगा, ऐसी संभावनाएं हैं। लेकिन ऐसे मार्केट्स को आपको कैसे देखना चाहिए, यानी कि फाइनेंशियल मार्केट्स, आपका करेंसी, कमोडिटी और इंटरेस्ट रेट सिनेरियो कैसा पैन आउट हो सकता है, इस पे हम चर्चा करेंगे। हमारे साथ बहुत ही खास मेहमान जुड़ चुके हैं, मिस्टर अनंत्या बनर्जी, इज सीनियर वीपी and head of currency, commodity and interest rates at Kotak Securities. Very good afternoon, Mr. Banerjee, and thank you so much for taking our time.
Thank you for having me here. A very good afternoon to you.
Thank you so much. So, Mr. Banerjee, let's start with interest rates. फेड की बैठक के बाद पहले तो 25-50 में बड़ी टग ऑफ वॉर हो रही थी, लेकिन 50 बेसिस पॉइंट्स आया। हालांकि फाइनेंशियल मार्केट्स ने इसको काफी अच्छे से बनाया, लेकिन रिसेशन के फेयर्स जो है वो अब फिर से उभरने लगे हैं कि क्या ये रिसेशनरी फेयर्स की वजह से फ्रंट लोडिंग की गई, या फिर जो डेटा पॉइंट्स है यूएस के वो इसको सपोर्ट कर रहे हैं। और रिसेशन डीप रिसेशंस की कोई बात नहीं है, इट्स जस्ट दैट वी माइट सी अ सॉफ्ट लैंडिंग। तो पूरे इंटरेस्ट रेट सिनेरियो को समझाइएगा कि पहले यूएस के लिए क्या मान्यता रखता है और इसका इम्पैक्ट जो है वो इमर्जिंग मार्केट्स और खासतौर पे इंडिया पे क्या पड़ सकता है।
Sure. See, if we look at the Fed interest rate cycle way back in 2000, so this is the third time in the last 30 odd years that Fed has started with a 50 basis point cut. Now,
Right.
last two times when it did that, 2001 and 2007, the crisis had already begun. So, subprime
जी
crisis in
जी
2007, and in 2001, it was a Y2K bubble burst.
जी
But this is the first time that we are not seeing any kind of a crisis as of now. And most importantly, the overall economic activity in America is still okay. It's not as strong as it was 1 year back, but
हम्म,
at least the consumer spending, business investments, housing activity, everything is soft, but it is still strong enough. So at least the current data is not indicating any kind of a recession. But let's now come to why 50 basis points. Because Fed has clearly said, the Fed governor, yesterday in the press conference, that this is not at all a start of 50 basis points of a series of cuts. The Fed is
okay,
saying we will get back to 25 basis points in the next meeting and thereafter. Now,
जी
why this 50 basis point happened? He actually had offered a hint. He said that we thought the July meeting was a too close to call.
हम्म,
So if we would have had the June inflation data, then we may have had cut rates. So
okay,
in my opinion, it basically is a July cut and September cut combined
okay,
together into September. So that's why, in my opinion, the 50 basis point cut happened. Now, as of now,
okay,
as I said, the data is not indicating any kind of a recession. But interestingly, if you look at all the previous economic cycles, it
हम्म,
was generally tough to predict preemptively when the recession will begin. But as of
जी
now, there is no indication on the ground to suggest that the US
हम्म,
economy will flip into a recession in the next 6 months or so.
सो व्हाट डज इट मीन फॉर इमर्जिंग मार्केट्स? इमर्जिंग मार्केट्स में ये माना जाता है कि जब इंटरेस्ट रेट डिफरेंशियल बढ़ता है तो फ्लोज जो है वो इमर्जिंग मार्केट की तरफ आते हैं, और साथ में ही जब डॉलर वीक होता है तो इमर्जिंग इकोनॉमीज के लिए अच्छा होता है। तो ऐसा कुछ होने वाला है।
Absolutely. In fact, this is the thing that happens, that when the interest rates in America goes down, that it becomes attractive to put money elsewhere. Now, if you look at the interest rate trajectory over the next 12 to 18 months, it's clearly downward. Market is saying by December of next year, Fed will get to 3%. Fed is saying we will need at least till mid of 2026. But both are clear that over a span of, let's say the difference is basically 6 months, that they will head to 3% rates, which is very good news for emerging markets. But the question is, where will the flows come to if we are talking about India? Now, FPI flows into the equity market has been not a great trend over the past couple of years because of
राइट।
various reasons. Now, we might see flows pick up in the debt market because after the inclusion in the global bond indices, that is a big opportunity as far as the FPIs are concerned, and especially when the interest rate differential will become attractive because RBI is not expected to be as aggressive as Fed because RBI did not hike rates the way Fed had to do because of its own inflation issues. So yes,
Right.
RBI is expected to cut rates, but it will be at a much slower pace, which means the interest rate differential between the two currencies will be widening in favor of the Indian rupee or the Indian
Okay.
debt instrument. So we could see a lot of flows into the Indian debt market. Equity market might see some flows, but not as much as debt.
But equity markets are driven by domestic institutions this time, so
Exactly.
we bother little about what FIs are doing. But yes, FIs are very important for the markets, and let's see how things pan out. आपने बात की RBI की और RBI आपने कहा कि gradually or slowly interest rate cuts में जाएगा. So when do we expect the first cut from RBI?
We are expecting it by end of this year, and possibly another one by April, May, because we think the RBI may cut rates from 6.5 to 6 eventually over the next 7 to 8 months. But as I said, RBI will be slow in cutting rates, but we expect the rates to go down.
राइट सर, करेंसी की बात कर लेते हैं. और डॉलर इंडेक्स काफी मजबूत था, तो हमारी करेंसी भी डेप्रिशिएट हो रही थी अगेंस्ट द डॉलर, बट इट वाज वेरी रिजिलिएंट इफ विज विज द अदर एशियन करेंसीज, और एक दायरे में, सीमित दायरे में इट वाज स्टक. लेकिन कल के ब्याज दरों की कटौती के बाद एक अच्छा आज एप्रिसिएशन हमको रुपये में देखने को मिल रहा. तो सो what is the level that you are looking at as far as the rupee is concerned against the vis-a-vis the dollars? Because ज़्यादा भी हम अपनी करेंसी को appreciate नहीं करना चाहेंगे, because then it hurts our exports.
Exactly. So I think we will see an appreciating bias, but as you rightly said and completely agree, the pace of appreciation will be extremely slow because RBI is going to accumulate dollars. They have already accumulated close to if you look at the FX reserve, it's close to $700 billion, 10-15 billion less. So the RBI accumulation of dollars will continue, and that will not allow the rupee to significantly appreciate. But the trend will be downward. We could see 83 kind of levels over the coming weeks, but nothing beyond that is our expectation.
ये तो डॉलर के साथ हुआ. बाकी vis-a-vis the other major currencies, how do you see rupee panning out?
So because other currencies can appreciate more against the dollar, so what will happen is when rupee is appreciating less, it will look like that rupee is depreciating against other currencies. So euro, pound, yen, etc. So that helps our competitiveness in the global trade because the global export scenario is challenging. So getting a help from the currency front is good. And most importantly, we have to understand that over the past few years since COVID, Indian rupee, if you look at the Indian rupee against the dollar and compare every other currency against the dollar, in volatility terms, we are almost the best performing currency in the world. So we are one of the least volatile currencies in the world, and that's where the RBI should get the credit for, because they have been keeping a hawk eye on this volatility, and I think they will continue to monitor volatility and target volatility.
Mr. Banerjee, how do you see USD yen trade currency panning out? क्योंकि जब पिछली बार येन एप्रिशिएट हुआ था तो हमने येन कैरी ट्रेड के चलते हुए एक जबरदस्त बिकवाली देखी थी इक्विटी मार्केट्स में वर्ल्ड ओवर एंड इंडिया में भी. आप वो करेंसी येन को कैसा देखते हैं गोइंग फॉरवर्ड, एंड आल्सो युआन, which is a very critical and major currency right now?
Right. See, coming to yen, as far as the yen carry trade is concerned, we looked at the history for the past 35 years since when the yen carry trade became a big phenomenon. Now, what has been interesting is whenever the unwound happened, there were two kinds of cycles. One was because of the Bank of Japan was hiking rates when other central banks were not, like it is the case now. The yen appreciated, it created some trouble in the financial markets, but those episodes did not last beyond a couple of weeks, like we saw a month back. But whenever there was an external crisis, like 2008 global financial crisis, or the Y2K meltdown in 2001 too, then the carry trade unwind was far bigger. So carry trade on its own because of a yen appreciation or the Bank of Japan is not such a huge phenomena which can last months unless some kind of external crisis emerges. So assuming that no crisis will emerge, no major crisis will emerge over the next 5-6 months, I don't think the yen carry trade will have a lasting impact on the global markets.
And what about the yuan?
Coming to Yuan, see, Yuan, there is a structural angle here because if you look at the current economic situation of China, it's actually entering a phase of deflation. And this is exactly what happens with a country which has invested too much into building capacity. Because for China, there are two sources of growth. One is the construction and property sector, the other one, the exports. Now, there's been a lot of complaints about China dumping goods into the world market and that creating fertile ground for trade war eventually. But the immense amount of overcapacity which China has built in its factories, in ports, in infrastructure, in property, that is a clear case where the economy can slip into deflation. So we'll have a consistently lower inflation in China. And that can be a reason where the currency does well, because that's exactly what happened with Japan. Because of the Japanese deflation, the yen has been a strong currency relatively. So that can be it can be a similar phenomena in China as well.
चलिए अब कमोडिटी की बात करते हैं और कमोडिटी में सबसे पहले गोल्ड की, क्योंकि इंडिया इज अ मेजर इंपोर्टर ऑफ गोल्ड एंड कंज्यूमर ऑफ गोल्ड. गोल्ड की जब भी बात आती है तो इंडियन इन्वेस्टर्स एंड द वंस हु रियली बाय, जो हाउस होल्ड है, वो बड़े उत्साह होते हैं कि प्राइस को देखे कहाँ जाएगा. गोल्ड ऑल टाइम हाई जो टच किया कल 50 बेसिस पॉइंट के कट के बाद, ग्रेजुअली इट हैज बीन मूविंग हायर. सो व्हाट आर द लेवल्स दैट यू सी फॉर गोल्ड नाउ? क्या आपको लगता है कि अब यहाँ पे जो बढ़त है वो थोड़ी थम जाएगी and the gold may see some bit of profit booking, and together with silver is outperforming gold right now?
Right, exactly. See, gold has everything going in its favor. When I say gold, I also mean silver as well. But let me first talk about gold. Because one, it is, of course, whenever the interest rates comes down globally, especially in US, gold does well because it is anti-dollar. It is seen as a opposite of dollar and another global reserve currency. So that is factor number one. Factor number two is more structural. We are seeing a wave of de-dollarization. When you have a wave of de-dollarization or a multipolar world, you need a global anchoring of currencies, so which becomes gold. And we are seeing a lot of accumulation of gold by the central banks all over the world. So that is factor number two. And factor number three, again, as I said at the start, that predicting recession is always very difficult unless and until it really happens. So if we get into a situation next year that US actually slips into a recession, the interest rate cuts from the Fed can be far more sharp. And they can also talk about things like QE. So in such situation, gold can benefit a lot. So lot is going in its favor. Now, price outlook internationally, 2,700 to 2,750 is what we are looking at in terms of MCX. We could see even levels of 74,500, even 75 in gold over the next let's say 7 to 8 months. Silver, as you rightly said, we are far more bullish on silver because silver has got this dual engine. One, it is a precious metal and a kind of money. So it benefits from the appreciation in the gold price. Second, it is also in industrial commodity. It has huge applications in electronics and the green sectors. So both of these things can ensure that silver can actually do far better than gold. So we are quite bullish on silver. We could see levels of $33 or $34, which could be close to 1 lakh rupees eventually on the silver price on M6.
Okay. And what about the other metals like copper, aluminum? How do you think that space is going to pan out?
See, copper, if you look at, there's a lot of talk has been of late, a bullish talk because of the whole the need to upgrade the whole electrical grid in the West. So there can be a huge demand for copper. All those things are there, but the current situation on the ground, the biggest problem for base metal is China, because China remains the biggest consumer of base metals, almost all large base metals. And that's where the trouble is, because that demand is exceptionally weak and the inventories are high. So, which means that yes, in the near term, because of this soft dollar, interest rate cuts, whole gung-ho about commodities, even the base metals can do well. Zinc can do much better than aluminium, which is a more construction sector oriented metal. And copper might just fit in between zinc and aluminium. But structural, the push which you need from the demand side is still missing, at least for the next 6 to 7 months. So which means over the next 6 months, we could see base metals being in a range in which zinc can actually outperform copper and aluminium. But overall, it can be a range.
एक आखिरी सवाल मिस्टर बनर्जी, क्योंकि अब सिनेरियो चेंज हो चुका है. अभी तक हम हाई इंटरेस्ट रेट्स की बात कर रहे थे. नाउ इट इज द रिवर्सल ऑफ इंटरेस्ट रेट साइकिल, और अब नीचे के इंटरेस्ट रेट्स जो है कटौती हमको देखने को मिलेगी. 3 थिंग्स that will play out for India as far as interest rate cuts are concerned, dollar depreciation is concerned. तो क्या 3 ऐसे ट्रिगर्स है जो वो इंडिया के फेवर में हो सकते हैं?
Right. See, the biggest factor is cost of money. When there are two important things here: cost of energy and cost of money. When they are cheap, you see economically and financially emerging markets do well, especially energy importers, right? So we are dollar importers and we are also energy importers. So we are in a phase where oil prices are lower, gas prices are also lower. So overall energy cost is lower. And at the same time, we have a situation where interest rates are coming down, which means cost of capital is going to be lower. So that is the time where Indian economy and Indian financial markets can do well, because we can receive a lot of flows. So that is one thing which can go in India's favor. And second thing is that because we are seeing a lot of interest on the semiconductor space again. So that again is one sunrise sector along with electronics, which can do well. And especially with this China one policy, and now the US elections are coming up. We have to see who comes to the Oval Office. So all those things are there, which actually the uncertainty which can emerge in the global situation, which again can benefit India. And third is the de-dollarization. If the de-dollarization picks up pace, it will benefit India as well, because as I said, it will enough at a time when the countries will look for alternate to their supply chain. Again, India can be a beneficiary of that.
I missed out on the crude front. I missed out on crude. With the major importers of crude prices are holding again within our range. We saw a steep fall from 80 levels to 70 levels, now around 72, 73. इसको कहाँ जाते देखते हैं आप in medium term?
See, for crude, it's good news for India, but bad news for the oil producers. Is that there are three or four kinds of issues that is happening. One is the demand has been highly disappointing. Like every time the OPEC has forecasted a very sizable increase in the demand, they had to come back and revise it downward. The revision it continues to be downward. So demand is exceptionally weak, not just from China, all over the world. That's point number one. Point number two, the non-OPEC part, which is now substantial, includes US, Latin American countries. There, the supply response is huge, and where OPEC is no control, right? And third is there is a lot of switching which is happening. For example, in China, they are now talking about switching their truck fleet, their fleet of trucks from diesel towards natural gas. That's a huge shift. Now, that is a third factor. The fourth is your alternatives, which are emerging because of the advancement in the technology. We're able to get more energy from the alternative sources. So structurally, oil is going to be in trouble. So if you look at the next 6 to 7 months, we could see levels of $60 eventually in Brent.
So some good news for India there again. Mr. Banerjee, बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया आज प्रोग्राम में शामिल होने के. Thank you so much for such an insightful discussion on currency, commodity and interest rates. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. It was my pleasure.